All right, we're live now. Hello, everyone. Good evening, good morning, wherever you're based. Welcome to our meetups. My name is Dalia, and I'm from Elastic's community team. Today, we are here with Nassim, and he will talk to us about from forced remote to remote first. What does it mean? He will talk to us about a remote workforce, and he will tell you, he will introduce himself, and he will tell you more about this great topic. I'm sure everyone is keen to learn more. Let's take all the questions at the end. And I think that's it. Thank you from here, Nassim.
Hi, everyone. Like Dalia said, today I'm going to talk about the transition from a forced remote culture to a remote first culture. A lot of us, if not everyone in the industry, has had to go in that transition with the current health pandemic. And I think that's an interesting topic. My name is Nassim Kamal, and I'm here and I've been caring about remote engineering management since 2014. I've been working in the past in co-located and mixed environment, companies like Etsy and MailChimp, to finally join a fully distributed and remote first company, which is Elastic. That was by choice. I really wanted to embrace that remote first aspect. And that was before the pandemic. I gave a talk at the lead developer conference in 2019 on how remote first team work better. And you'll see that a lot of the concept exposed then before the pandemic still apply today. But today I want to focus more on that forced transition a lot of companies had to go through. And this may be the case for in your work environment. Some of the topics we will cover today include the foundation for having a remote workforce, the 21st century workplace disease, that's why I call it. The one-time latency should be embraced. And finally, we're going to talk about mental health and burnout. So my cousin worked at a small French company, and he shared with me not too long ago that during the pandemic, when folks had to work remotely, the company put in place a hard guidelines around working hours, including the lunch breaks from 12:30 to 1:30 p.m. During that time frame, nobody was allowed to work or anything. That was the official lunch break. I can't really say that I was necessarily surprised, but I was saddened a bit to hear that it was working for what I call or what I picture in my head, 1.0 company. Kind of stuck a bit into the old view. The old view is where you have time-based expectations. Folks are supposed to clock in at a certain time and clock out at a certain time, and we track the number of hours. Low trust system, where you have in-person check-ins, ad hoc pings to check if someone is there and see what they're up to. And in the end, a bit of infantilization of the workplace, where you have to ask for permissions to go to the doctor, for example, or leave early. So what would a 2.0 company look like? What would they do differently? A 2.0 company would optimize for employee engagement. There is a fantastic book by Daniel Pink. The book is called Drive. And in there, Daniel Pink shares that the carrot and stick approach is kind of outdated. And the secret to high performance and satisfaction at work depends on three elements. It's not money. It's autonomy, mastery, and purpose, or the ability to control what you do, when you do it, and who you do it with. That's autonomy. Mastery, the ability to progress at work and continuously learn those new skills. And the purpose, or the belief that we are working towards something bigger and more important to all of us. So it's pointless to just look into checking in into all my people here and so on, are they following the rules? If you want a workforce to be engaged and making sure that your people, if you can't see them, that they're still working, you need to engage them. And the way to do it is by optimizing and checking in onto those three metrics, those three aspects: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. As I lead two different teams, and that's actually one of the questions I ask regularly in my one-on-one. It would go like, hey, John, like on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel about your current sense of autonomy or mastery and purpose? And say John says it's a 6 right now. Where we go? What would it take to go from a 6 to a 7? But that's really how I gauge and what I look into how people are feeling. I don't care what time they start working or what time they end working. I care more about their general well-being and a sense of engagement. So that covers the first part on how to know if people are working, how to have folks being engaged. The second point I want to talk about is creating an environment where folks can succeed. And this requires taming the busyness and something called the hyperactive hive mind. I first heard of the term and catastrophic effect of the busyness or the hyperactive hive mind from Cal Newport. He's the author of Deep Work and Digital Minimalism and A World Without Email, a bunch of different books, where he pretty much exposes his readers to a few concepts that plagues most of the knowledge workers' work environment, pretty much our work in the tech industry. And that's the concept of hyperactive hive mind, sorry. The overall idea is you're always connected. Imagine having a bunch of bees always revolving and always paying attention to everything. That's pretty much the world we're in right now. Newport kind of outlines a bunch of different concepts, like the principle of least resistance. Like without clear feedback on the impact of our behaviors of the bottom line, we're going to tend towards what's the easiest. Or even more important, like the busyness as a proxy for productivity. As in, again, back in the old view, the only way to show, hey, I'm working, I'm doing something, is like seeming productive, being reactive. I'm getting pinged somewhere on Slack, for example. If I can show everyone, hey, I'm here, I'm there, I'm involved everywhere, that's a sign of productivity. Those are the view. Technopoly, like just using the tools because they exist. Or the metric black hole, measuring the cost of shallow work is pretty difficult. So we don't actually measure the impact on time and productivity that we lose on the number of emails that we receive or the number of Slack interactions that we receive. We talk about it, we know about it, but we don't really measure it. We just accept it. Or even worse, one of the value at Elastic is home dinner. That's one of our core value, or the ability to disconnect from work at the end of the day. Are we still able to shut down? So ultimately, our last concept is what Newport rolls into that concept of hyperactive hive mind. And I would say that one of the biggest challenges that we have right now that we are all working remotely is we need to move away from that environment in order to get more focus around what we're doing. Some of the things that that means is like moving away from checking emails constantly, or riding the Slack conveyor belts. What I mean here on the slide around exposing ourselves to a lot of open loops is if you're constantly on Slack and you keep seeing information popping up, your brain is engaged onto different situations that you may be able to do something about it, maybe you're not, but in your brain, it's just hijacking you and context switching constantly. And at the end of the day, you're not able to concentrate around what you're doing. And the same happens with your emails. There was a study in 2016 conducted by UC Irvine and MIT and Microsoft that concluded that people check their email over 77 times per day. And other studies, or even worse, they show that most of us cannot go more than 6 minutes without checking emails or IM. Or that the longest uninterrupted interval time that we can go without checking emails was 40 minutes. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is that this hyperactive hive mind environment that we're in, favors shallow work, really superficial work where you're always constantly checking for things that are moving, but you're not able to really deeply engage into what you're doing. Shallow work, non-cognitively demanding logistical style work. And if you don't believe me around how productivity is impacted by distractions and so on, we can look at one of our favorite productivity tools, Slack. When there was an outage in like 2018, I think there was a pretty big one in June. So the numbers are pretty outdated, but on this chart, you can see the week prior the outage, that was the blue line, the general productivity rated for folks in a specific company. And then the week of the outage, the same day, but 1 week later during the outage. And you can see the boost in productivity just because people did not have access to the hyperactive mind. They were less distracted, I guess. So what we want to optimize on instead is deep work. Actually, if you ask folks what makes a good day for them, a lot of people would say it's when I reach a state of flow. I ship something. I feel a sense of progress towards my predefined goals. And so if you want your teams to have a shot at achieving this deep work, you have to craft an environment where they can strive. And this starts by taming the hyperactive mind. So how would we go about this? There are 3 main steps that we can cover. Step number 1 would be doing an audit of all the different processes that you have in your teams. Number 2 would be around experimenting and coaching. And number 3, embracing the different type of communication, including the asynchronous communication. So let's start with the process audit. Newport talks about the autonomy trap in a very good podcast interview that I really recommend with Ezra Klein from the New York Times. The interview was in March 2021. And in there, it kind of explains how we've been optimizing for autonomy for knowledge workers again. And we've been like leaving every decision and process up to the workers. And that is pretty much a mistake. He argues in there that the workflow should be a team effort. We collectively should not be deciding, hey, I want to use this cool tool because it's cool, but rather we should be looking at what are we trying to optimize for as a team, and what's the best way to go about it, and then picking the tool that helps us achieve it. So in the case of the hyperactive mind, what you want to reduce, again, what you want to reduce is reducing the constant back and forth. I'm having a conversation with this person and this person and this person, and just playing ping pong with all of them. You want to reduce all of that ping pong. And so you need to design all your processes around it, around reducing the back and forth. And so in some cases, it may mean, for example, that there is no Slack support. You cannot go into the channel and say, you know what, if you want help, just come and ping us onto the Slack room. You may be having something in place like office hours, for example, or moving to a ticketing system where there is a non-process. Everyone in the team is going to review those tickets, but you don't allow people to interrupt you constantly by tapping on the shoulder. Sure, it's convenient when you're the receiver of it, but for the team who have to provide the service, it's a huge cost. And so you need to decide as a team what makes sense for you. I'm not preaching for one or the other, but it needs to be a conscientious decision of we're going this direction. Step number 2, for getting out of the hyperactive mind and kind of regaining this control, is to have a culture of experiment and strong coaching of employees. Again, I'm speaking as a team lead here, but I do spend a lot of time trying to talk about that topic of productivity and kind of leading by example, sharing my workflow, trying to demonstrate the behaviors that we want to see and so on. So some examples would be being very vocal around do not check emails at night, for example, or on the weekends, or trying some experiments like, why don't you try checking your emails once at noon and once at the end of the day? The first part of your day, just get set down onto your big rock. The big things that you want to achieve during the day, do it first thing so that you're not distracted by all of the different emails that happen. They can wait until noon. And then noon, when you're a bit more tired or you need a break, you go get your emails. Again, no cognitive overload. And then afternoon, you can go back to your big rocks and so on. But again, it's about having those conversations and encouraging those different experiments with the different people on the team that we can see, okay, this works for Chris, but this doesn't work for Julian, for example. And everyone can try different techniques. The same goes with Pomodoros or the concept of time blocking to really get in the zone. Or having at MailChimp, at my previous company, I worked on something called the Slack quiet hours. And that was where, as a team, on twice a week, nobody was allowed to, there was no conversation allowed into the Slack room. No private or public conversation. It was just, you have the permission to be completely disconnected from Slack. You can get in the zone. You're not going to miss out on anything. It's one of the team norm on those days before 1 p.m. So culture of experiment and active coaching, talking about it. And last but not least, embracing the different type of communication. So the main thing about async communication, I would say it's the fundamental piece to enable work flexibility and enabling flow. The idea is like, we no longer dictate when folks should pay attention to the work. It's more the person doing the work that decides, that kind of pulls the information. A great colleague of mine at Elastic, Rich Kuzma, shared the following concept with me, that working remotely introduces latency. And actually, that's probably the very, very first time that it can be used to your advantage. And it's all about moving away from time management and moving into mind management. Pull communication versus push communication. Instead of imposing to everyone, you're going to work on this project from this time to this time because it's convenient for everyone, you kind of detach yourself and you set up the right environment for people to make progress at their own pace when it works for them. This takes longer, but if you have enough multiplexing, if you have enough parallel streams of work, you get much better results. And in the case of Elastic, where we are fully distributed around the globe, it works much better because you cannot have everyone working from a certain time to a certain time. You need to have that flexibility. So what are some of the benefits of async communication? Well, number one, it kind of levels out the playing field. Back in the days when I was still working in an office, I've been in meetings where there was a single person that was completely dominating the whole conversation. You couldn't say a single thing. Even worse, when I was a remote dialing into a meeting where everybody was inside the same room, I just couldn't partake into the conversation because I couldn't be heard. I couldn't just intervene. When everybody is communicating asynchronously, everybody has the same chance to pitch in and provide their input. So you kind of level out the playing field. Number two, it encourages thoughtfulness and actually thinking about what you want to say. No more knee-jerk reaction. Like if you're not able to express in writing an idea, well, the odds are that it's probably not very clear in your head what you're wanting to say, and maybe it's better that you sit on it until you're able to properly express it. And the last big benefit of async communication is that it does leave a trail. You're defaulting to high level of transparency. You have a written history of everything that has happened, and that's more inclusive for everyone to be going back to what's been discussed and being visible for everyone. Now, I am not saying that you should be getting rid of sync communication. Sync communication is still the highest bandwidth tool that we have, but you should use each communication style when it makes the most sense to use it. So let's review this. Like, what is the best sync? When is sync communication the best for? That's great. That's actually the best that we have for high back and forth exchanges, like social time, or brainstorming, or gaining alignment, or providing time critical support. Have you ever been, like, again, on facing an issue, a technical issue, and you're going into a Slack room, for example, or you're going through an issue and you just play ping pong of, I've tried blah, wait, someone else responded to the issue, do X, do Y, do D, and it takes forever. No, in such case, just jump into a Zoom room, into a video, and pair and figure it out. High back and forth exchange, sync communication, that's the best that we have. Now for async, anything that is high in context or on cognitive demand. So anything like status update, where it's going to be a one-way communication, or design and architecture reviews, when you have a lot of cognitive and you really need to be concentrated when you read it and so on, or even like deep technical conversations. with a lot of arguments. All of those can happen async. So what does this look like in practice? Well, I can give you an example with one of my team. We hired not long ago someone, my team in Australia. And all of a sudden, we were officially distributed across the three main regions around Americas, Europe, and APJ, Asia Pacific, Japan. And the main issue with that setup is that you can no longer meet in person to have a stand-up meeting. It gets very expensive because for Chloe, who is in Australia, it's going to be 11 p.m. for her. And for Jonah, who is in the US, it's going to be 6 a.m. And just that to have an in-person stand-up meeting, that's just not worth it. That's way outside of working hours, of decent working hours, and I don't want that. That's a big no-no. We also tried the Slack stand-up, but that ended up being too low context, bullet point style updates. And that was just not cutting it. They became kind of meaningless, or it was kind of hard to follow, really get into the weeds of it. So what did we end up doing? We switched to fully async stand-ups, and we are now leveraging GitHub Discussions. And the way it works is every iteration, we work in 3 weeks iteration, we start a new GitHub discussion. And at the very top of the discussion, we start what are the OKRs for the quarter? What are the objectives, like the 7 or 8 GitHub issues that we really want to ship in this iteration? And then every day we have a new update topic that we add to the discussion. And everyone on the team goes back and edit the conversation with their update. And we use context heavy updates with a lot of markdown to reference other issues and so on. So when you look back at the end of the 3 weeks and you look back at your discussions of 3 weeks of updates, you can clearly see the progress that you've made towards the big deliverables that you want to ship. And you have all of the context. As a added benefit, when you come back from PTO for 1 week PTO of part-time off, sorry, you go on vacation, you come back 1 week later and you want to catch up on what's been happening, where you can just go read the discussion and you have all the updates. You're right there, you have all the context. You don't need to ask anyone, or worse, you don't need to go through your 10,000 GitHub notification emails to catch up on what's been happening. Everything is in one place. So this wraps up the second part around async stand-up and creating the deep work environment. And finally, the last part, as I just talked about working asynchronously, what about the feelings of isolation? Working remotely is different. Being away from people is different. We're just living a different time and challenging time, especially now. And so that means tuning in and being a lot more flexible. It does mean that we need to redefine a bit the social interactions that we may have at work. May means revisiting our 9-to-5 schedule that may be outdated. And finally, it does mean that we need to pay attention to mental health and burnout. So social interactions at a distance, back in the days when you were still going to the office, you could just have that coffee break or that watercolor moment where you could just walk in and have that conversation. There is no more of this. Everything has to be very intentional, all of your interactions. And there is no really small talk anymore, but you get to know each other a lot deeper. And as you work remotely, I mean, right now, just through this video, you're getting an insight of my life, of what's behind me. And right now, I don't have my kids around me, but if they were running here, you would see them. That's very personal. That's something you would never get if I were to go into the office. That's kind of redefining the social interactions. And I would argue that in some cases, you kind of get closer to your colleagues than before. Whether it's good or bad, that's just the way it is. So we need to iterate on redefining the social bounds. Number two, I would argue that it's good to embrace and encourage flexibility, especially again during those pandemic times when there is a lot of unknown and impromptu things happening with school shutting down and having to keep the kids at home, or any sort of interruption that may happen. We need the flexibility more than before. The value that we go a lot by at Elastic is family over work. Always care for what's the most important and trust your employees to do the right thing. I personally don't care if my team works from 9 to 5. I don't track their hours. I care that they do the right thing first for the family and then the work, and then the works happen. If they want to go surfing the whole day and they want to go work at night, I don't care, as long as they ship, as long as the outcomes are there. How it's done, that's the problem. It's a different mindset, but think about it. What matters the most to you? And finally, on burnout, I would say that sadly, more than ever, it's a new normal. I think it's time we break that taboo, we educate ourselves, and really get familiar with it. The current environment of being constantly at home, being constantly onto the systems of at work, connected and so on, we're seeing a lot more burnout at work. And the bottom line is, for everyone, especially leaders, we have to educate ourselves around recognizing the size of burnout and talking about it, sharing our own vulnerabilities, and kind of being more open about it. I mentioned here giving more time for folks to breathe. That's something important. Something that I've seen that does not work is unlimited time off. That doesn't work because you don't set any norm. Nobody wants to. You tell someone like, yeah, you have unlimited time off. They're not gonna take it because they don't know what's acceptable and not. So you put the burden onto the employees to maybe take it, which they're not going to. What I've seen work is what currently Elastic has is the shut it down days, where every now and then, usually twice a month, we have 4 days work week. We can work on that fifth days and catch up if we want to, but that's not encouraged. Those are shut it down days where we can take it easy, more relaxed, disconnect. Other companies have the no meeting days, kind of similar concept. But the bottom line is give time for folks to breathe. Kind of get out of the rush and the always on culture. Take care and focus on oneself. And with this, that's a wrap for my talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nassim. It was very, very informative. Let's see if we have any questions on the chat now. Nope, I don't see anything coming up. We can end earlier in that case. Cool. Well, thanks everyone for joining. We hope to see you at our next meetups, and thank you very much, Nassim, for presenting.
Thanks, Dalia.
Have a great evening, great day. Bye.
Bye.